There's so much that artists don't realize, that the goal is not to be a signed artist. The goal is to have complete autonomy and awareness of your brand and your audience. And that's why artist development matters. That's why people don't even understand it. Artists don't understand that you're a business and you're a brand. And so you have to know what your brand is, what you want it to look like. Because if you don't know, someone else will tell you. They'll put you into the vending machine of the industry and out pops XYZ artist that they want you to sound like. And that happens all the time. And there's a lot of people out there who are ready to take your money and develop you. You got to do some self-development and really know who you are.
Welcome to the Grant Owen Podcast, where we explore the world of entrepreneurship. Join us as we dive into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to start, grow, and scale a successful business. We're on a mission to share our experiences, failures, insights, and advice with others. Whether you're just starting out in your entrepreneurial journey or you're looking to take your business to the next level, tune in and join the conversation about what it takes to succeed in the world of business.
We going full throttle.
Welcome to the Grant Owen Podcast. It is a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I have Shelby Rollins, and I am super pumped about this conversation. But before we dive in, I have to ask you, if you get value from this conversation, if you get value from Shelby, one, follow her, give her some love, and then two, if you wouldn't mind just sharing this with somebody else that might find this interesting, because I don't make podcasts for huge renown. It's to help one person in one moment at one time. So that is the meaning of why we invest time and do this, because we want to give value to you. And Shelby, I know, wants to give value to you. So if someone benefits from this and you're thinking, oh, my friend actually wants to learn about being a vocalist, she wants to learn about coaching, she wants to learn about this kind of stuff, please reach out to that person, send this podcast to that person, he, she, they, I don't care. Send it to them, because that's why we do this. And we just want to help that one person. So Shelby, thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to talk to you. I actually have, I went through your background and oh my gosh, so can I geek out for just like a second?
Of course.
Just like a second. I am a huge Colby Calais fan.
Oh.
And I am an even bigger Johnny Swim fan.
Oh, nice.
And so when I saw that you had worked with them,
yeah,
I was like, oh my goodness, that is the coolest thing on the planet Earth. Like I found them like when they just had an EP out.
Yeah.
And I think I've been to 10 of their shows.
Oh, wow.
Like I'm like, my wife and I are just like
fan.
Massive fans.
That might be more shows than I've been to.
We were like really, really doing.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I've been to a lot.
It.
I've been to a lot of their shows, but I think you've beaten me potentially.
So can we start there? Because I know there's all this background you have. There's training. There's ensemble groups. There's so much, like you have such a wealth of experience in vocal training. Mm-hmm. But can you talk to me a little bit about up until that point, just because I'm super curious about your history with them and what that looked like? Because I'm going to be a super fan for a second and just say I need to know.
Yeah, like how I met them and started working with them.
Yeah, please.
First of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate being here. I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have been friends with Abner and Amanda from Johnny Swim for, probably like 12, 13 years, something like that. And we met through mutual friends, and we sang together actually. But they were a band, but they had not really put anything out yet. They had, but not they had done very, very small projects. If you go too deep into their archives, like you can't find this kind of stuff on Spotify. You've got to know somebody with like a burnt CD. You know what I mean? You can find their OG material from like 2008 or something like that. Or I don't even know. No, it probably would have been like 2010. And, so this was before they had put out any like Diamonds, which was their first big record, and things like that. Yeah. So we were singing together at a conference that was put on by a campus ministry, and our friend was sort of in charge of putting everybody together, and we were all just singing together because we were all friends with him. And that's how we met, and just started, I remember chatting about vocal things because I was teaching. I was living in Nashville at that time, and I was doing some vocal coaching. And so we just started talking, and probably a couple months later, they reached out and wanted to do some vocal lessons. And so I started working with them that way. And that was, that was like 12 years ago, I think. Because I think my oldest child, I didn't have any kids yet when I started coaching them. So this was probably like 11
That's
or 12
super
years
fun.
ago. Yeah, that's how we met and just became really good friends. And I've just worked with them ever since then. And then Colby
That's super
actually
fun.
came as a connection from Johnny Swim. So they are friends with her. And if I remember correctly, don't quote me here, except you're going to quote me here because I'm being recorded. But she was friends with them and got my information. No, it was her ex-fiance got my information because
Okay.
they were acquaintances. They do know each other, right? And he saw me on YouTube coaching Johnny Swim, and he was a fan of theirs and reached out to the studio I was coaching at and asked if he could book a session with me. So he came in. His name is Justin Young, and if you haven't looked up his stuff, his voice and artistry is phenomenal. Like unreal, one of the best
Awesome.
vocalists I've ever worked with. But he started working with me, and then after probably a couple of years, I started working with Colby, and then I worked with Gone West, which was the band that the two of them plus another couple were all in together. They had a country record, and yeah,
Oh, nice.
they're not a
I
band
didn't know
anymore. But
that happened. Yeah,
yeah,
that checks out. That's cool. Yeah, because that whole world, I think it was like, uh, like my claim to fame is like I think like my second cousin from my wife's side is like Drew Holcomb, and I was
oh
like
yeah,
anybody in that sphere of people,
right.
I was like I just love the music. I listen to so much of it.
It's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon,
I
Yeah,
Yeah,
because Drew and
100%,
Ellie are
exactly.
good
Well,
friends.
but in Nashville, yeah, it's
Yeah,
in Nashville though. I feel like everybody kind of is even more so because like
totally.
Nashville's so chill.
It is.
Like people
I
just
always
like interact
say,
and hang out.
yeah, Nashville is really cool from a networking standpoint because you're never more than like 1 degree of separation away from the dream that you want to have realized in many, many regards when it comes to relationships. So that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon rule applies. It's more like 1 to 2 degrees in Nashville. But you have to understand that
Yeah,
this can also be a bad thing because your reputation is everything here. And if you burn a bridge or just don't show up as your best version of yourself, people will find out. And then that can negatively impact all of your relationships. So, just show up and be
yeah.
awesome and it'll be great.
What's the difference between your time in New York versus your time in Nashville? Like, what's the artist scene like in those two different places?
It's a good question. I lived in New York for almost 5 years and I've been here for almost 15. So I've been here almost 3 times as long now, which is crazy. I was there in my early 20s, fresh out of college, and didn't really know anything about the music industry. I was a theater major in college, but I wanted to do just singer-songwriter music as an artist in New York City. So I didn't move there to be an actor. And because I didn't study music or music business at all in college, I didn't really know a whole lot. So I got there and it was just the school of hard knocks, and just trying to figure it out. I'd play at venues in the Lower East Side and beg my friends to come to my shows. And I didn't like networking because I didn't really know how to do it well and do it in a way, like my mindset was not right with it. I just kind of felt like slimy networking, like, pushing my EP or whatever and trying to get people to take a meeting with me. And I didn't even know what my brand was or really what my vision was as an artist. So I didn't have anything to really offer. And now, as a 40-year-old living in Nashville for almost 15 years, I've learned so much from the other side of the industry as a coach and in artist development that now I would be more successful if I were going into it as an artist. So in terms of context, it's kind of hard. It's kind of apples and oranges, and the nature of the cities are so different. But I will say, the artistic community feels different here than it did in New York. I think part of this is this like scarcity mentality that artists tend to have in New York. They're all, the starving artist idiom. People assume it's like this like caricature, and it's true. I was that person too. And so because of that, there's this thing of I don't really want to share my resources with another artist because then they take my opportunity and I've got to keep that for myself. There's more hoarding than collaborating, I felt like there in my experience and the circles that I was in. In Nashville, it is so much more of a shared communal experience. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And people just know, like, if I share resources, it comes back to me. It is more of the collective, more of the community working together and all of that, because people know that the relationships are where your success is going to come from. And so if we create more bridges, more relationships, then we will all be more successful. So it's just interesting how different it feels from my vantage point.
I feel like LA is pretty similar to that too, in the sense that LA seems like a lot faker to me, where every artist or every musician or every producer, there's you're at a party and you kind of like you're nice to each other. And you're like, oh yeah, we should totally link up and awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited about what you're doing. And then it's just like ghosts. And there's no follow up. There's no follow through because no one wants to, like, there's not a genuine, like, I actually want to support you. I actually want to support people in the community. It's like all of the New York hunger and starving artist thing, but without, like, with more fakeness. It's like happier. It's like a happier New York in that sense. I feel like Nashville is like ideal in between because it's like, I don't know. It definitely seems like when someone's like, I want to work with you, they're like, yeah, let's hang out next week. Let's see what happens. I'll play a song for you.
It's true. They really mean it. Yeah. There definitely is more follow through with that kind of stuff. And I've not lived in LA. I've spent some time out there. I almost moved there instead of New York. Actually, I was really debating between New York and LA when I graduated college, and ended up deciding on New York, which was totally the right fit for me. And I loved living there when I did in my 20s. And everybody kept going, why don't you want to move to Nashville? Because of what you're describing. And because it was a little bit more of this southern, suburban, easy, chill city versus a big city environment like like New York or LA. And I rejected that flatly. I was like, I do not want to go to Nashville. No, thank you. I want a big city. I was coming from the suburbs and I grew up in that life, and I just wanted something totally different. And so it was funny that I really resisted coming to Nashville. People were like, why don't you want to go there? And I was like, because it's too much like home and I want something different. And now, I mean, I don't know. You couldn't pay me to go anywhere else. Like, I love being here.
Yeah. What do you, I was just in Nashville last week actually. And when I've been to Nashville previously, like I went to, like, the towns outside. I went to East Nashville, which is like the coolest part. Cause like if I'm hanging with my Nashville friends, they're like, no one's going downtown. Like that's just not where So I went downtown for the first time this last week. And I was like, dude, I hate this. It was awful. It was just miserable. It was really, really like, it was sad. Like, it was like, it was tough.
It's like Times Square of Nashville is the downtown Broadway area. And it's just bar after bar after bar. And it's an experience. And people feel like, oh, I have to go experience that. And I'm like, you really don't. Like, you really don't.
Yeah.
There's probably some really good people watching, but I've never had anybody go and experience downtown as a tourist and then come back and be like, that was amazing. They come back and they're like, you're right. Yeah. We probably should have done something else. It's just a lot of drunk people.
It's the equivalent of like going to Hattie B's. It's like, you're not like, that's to me, like, that's not hot chicken. It's like, that's the, like Philly, I'm from Philly, and now I have my own version of that with like cheesesteaks and like the places you don't go to like the Liberty Bell. Like that's just like not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, people go to the Rocky Steps. It's like, no, don't do that. That's not like actually Philly. So it's really funny. Every culture has their own little thing. I want to dive into a little bit of your background though, and especially with your expertise in this. What's the difference? I always thought of vocal coaches as something that like, it's something that is for, and I want you to correct me on this because I know I'm incorrect. It's for rich people that want to learn how to sing. And it's usually the people that hire vocal coaches are either already really good, like you're describing, or they're really, really bad. And they're like, I want to learn how to sing for the first time. Is that accurate? Is that not accurate? Like, what's your experience with the people you've worked with?
That definitely applies to that segment of people, but it is so much more than that. It is all of the in-between. And it's something that me and colleagues of mine feel like we're constantly having to educate on, because that is such a misnomer. I've been asked numerous times over the years when I've been asked, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a vocal coach. And they sometimes look at me sort of puzzled, like, that's a real job? I'm like, yes, this is like literally my career. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. So yes, it's a real job. Yeah. But to your question, for like the super rich people, whether they're good or bad, that's just, people just hire vocal coaches. They just want to learn how to sing, because there is an assumption that the skill or the gift, if you will, of singing and music is just granted to us by God, and no one can actually develop the skill, if you will. You know, it's just for the lucky few. It's just the people who were born like Whitney Houston, and they've just got that thing, but you can't teach it. In fact, I one time had somebody comment on one of my posts. This was forever ago. This was years back. And it was, I think it was an ad that I had. And it was basically me saying this concept of anybody can learn. It's a skill because your voice is a muscle. The vocal cords that produce the sound are a muscle, and you can learn how to develop any muscle in your body with the right physical training. And somebody commented on that, and she was like, "You're a scam artist. You're trying to take people's money. That's not true." And I was like, okay, wow. But that actually is what people perceive, because they think it's only for these magically gifted people that don't ever need to develop. And honestly, I was talking about Justin Young before, when he came in to see me for the first time, and not everybody knew who he was. His reputation has grown tremendously. But I didn't know who he was. Like, I didn't know his name. And he came in and he's just chatting with me. He's like, "I just moved to Nashville, and, I sing with my fiance." And he didn't name drop, right? He didn't say it was Colby Calais. He was just like, "I just am here to get better." And he started playing me one of his songs, and my jaw hit the floor. And I was like, "You're insane. Your voice is unreal. What do you need help with exactly? How can I help you?" But what was so amazing is he was like, "I just want to get better. I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to improve what I'm doing." So somebody who is already as incredibly gifted as him, those people that are at the top of their field, and this, those are the ones that have the mindset of growth. Those are the people that are like, "I know I can get better. I may be really good, but I know I can get better," because they've gotten better already. They've already had to work to get to where they were going. They didn't just come out of the womb singing like that. There's totally natural gifting involved, but even the people that don't have it can develop it. And so I always compare it to athletes. Nobody ever would expect somebody like Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady to ever be the GOAT of their field without a coach. Nobody. Everybody knows that they have multiple coaches, and not just like the team coach. Tom Brady had like quarterback coaches, like specific ones dialed in for him, and somebody for everything in his realm and his expertise. But people don't look at music the same way, especially singing specifically, more even than just instrumentalists. But like I said, your voice is a muscle. If no one would expect a professional athlete to get to be the best, then why would anybody expect a musician or a singer to get to be the best in their field? And so, there's this thing that people think, "Oh, I don't want to get a coach because they're going to mess with my artistry, and my raw, authenticity." And while that has happened, there is bad coaching out there for sure. The reality is really, really good coaching and really solid technique in an artist is going to give them their most authentic sound, not the other way around. It actually makes them more unique and more artistic because it rids their voice of all of the bad technique and habits and coordinations that are holding them back and forcing them to manipulate in order to sing something. You strip all that away, now you get to see what your voice really sounds like underneath all of that.
Yeah. So there's also that same level though, where it's like you mentioned artistry. I think when I think of vocal coach, there's so many people that have stylized voices. There's the Bob Dylans, right? Where it's like, sure, Bob, get a vocal coach. You also just have a bad voice because you're kind of he's a songwriter, right? It's like no one's going to watch him because you're like, man, he has a really killer voice. It's like, you have CeCe Winan, you have, Tasha Cobb, you got Whitney Houston, you have all these other people that are like, yeah, I'm going to go listen. Nowadays in the worship realm, it's like Naomi Rain. It's like, I'll go and listen for that voice.
Yep.
But then there's also the people that are really making a name for themselves, either with the production, right, to compensate, or they're making a name for themselves just because of their writing.
Yeah.
Why? So in that sense, like, what are the types of people that really, like, do you have an opinion on how much that actually affects the artistry and skilling up the voice aspect as well as like the writing aspect? Like when it comes to successful people, do you feel like there's a lane where like I really normally see that the voice is actually a more driving factor because normally you have other people writing for you?
That's a great question. I've worked with songwriters over the years who didn't necessarily have a vision for being an artist, but they wanted to work on their voice, which most people be like, why, if you're not going to perform? And it was because some of them, the good ones, have an understanding that if they can expand their range and do different things with their voice that they were not previously capable of doing, it impacts their writing, because now they're going to write songs in, bigger songs that they can do in a different key. Most people just instinctively are going to be writing around the range of motion that they feel comfortable with as a singer. Because a lot of times you get into these writing sessions, especially now, and this is the Nashville way, is you get into these co-writes with two other people or so, usually like 1 to 2 other writers. One of them is usually a producer, and the other one might be another writer who fills in your gaps. So say you're a lyricist, there may be more melody or something like that. Then you've got a producer in the room. And at the end of that session, you're going to produce a pretty amazing demo of your song that has like a track built that the producer created. And the writing process has just evolved so much over the last 10 years even. So knowing that you're going to then record the song at the end of your session, some of these songwriters are now feeling that pressure because they're going to demo it with their vocal, right? And they're probably not going to write something that they then cannot execute in that demo recording, because a lot of times that demo is what gets pushed to a big artist and you want it to sound good. Demos these days are not like work tapes of the past. They're professional. They're basically a single without being mastered. And I mean, they're really next level. And so you've got these people that are now starting to want to expand their own writing abilities, and they often need their voice to grow with their penmanship of that skill, so that they can write in, other genres, and they can write in, higher registers and ranges and things like that. So I think that there's definitely a place for songwriters growing in their voice as well, even if they don't necessarily have a vision for being the artist themselves.
Yeah. I'm curious for you, was writing ever a thing for you? Have you felt like you are always more confident in just singing, or do you consistently write now still?
I definitely did both. So when I was in college and I knew, I was like, I want to be a singer, some artist. My world was very small. I didn't really know a whole lot. I didn't have any idea artistically what I wanted that to be like. I just assumed, because I knew nothing about the music industry, I just assumed that I was a singer and I would have other people write songs for me, which did happen for the longest time. And that's just not as much the way as it used to be. A lot of artists now, even though they will pick songs that other people wrote, they now are also writing songs themselves as well, even if they're not necessarily the biggest writer in the world. But I didn't see it that way. I was like, I'll just have people write songs for me. I don't really care. I don't really want to write. And then I was challenged in a theater class, actually, to write a song. And I had to write my first song, and I recruited a good friend of mine who was just a better musician than me to help me with chord structure and melody. And I wrote my very first song, and it was kind of terrible, but also I loved the process of it. And I started writing and writing. And so when I moved to New York, I was writing all of my songs. So I co-wrote here and there, but I was a little scared of co-writing. It felt super vulnerable. And so I did not flex that muscle very much, just a little bit here and there. But I mostly was a solo writer, writing my own stuff. And that then became my vision as an artist, as singer-songwriter, like both and. So even though I don't pursue artistry anymore, or at least not presently, I still was writing for a while in living in Nashville. But because of just coaching and what my career was doing, I just ramped up in another direction. I have not really actively written in a long time. I do love songwriting. I just haven't done it in a while.
Yeah. Why? So there's this underbelly of Nashville that is there's the artist, and then there's I kind of put you in a similar category as writers, because it's like this background of really bolstering up the actual artist. And sometimes, writers are more so they're writing songs and then they're thinking, oh, okay, that song sounds like it could be a Tim McGraw song. Like that song sounds like it could be you kind of have more that lane. They're just writing a song and then kind of trying to find a path for whoever it's supposed to end up with.
Yeah.
And then at the same time with you, you're kind of coaching, I'm sure especially on the live, there's the recording process coaching aspect. And then there's the live singing, which is is just yeah, that's where you really need a muscle, right? Is
Yeah.
like when you're singing every night on tour,
Right.
it's like you really need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Hmm.
That's a whole separate industry, along with the musicians, of just like the people that are just like, I'm just going to be a guitarist. I'm just going to be I'm just going to be a band player.
Yeah.
Um, what's the path? Because what's the path for some people nowadays? I think there's a lot of people that are probably like going to school for music
Hmm.
without an understanding that that's really what the business is, and that's what the business is like, and that's actually like mad successful. Like any of those people like are at the top of the top of the top. There's so many people that are just like going to school for music theory, and they probably fall into teaching
Yeah.
at schools because that's where like that makes the most amount of sense to them.
Hmm.
What's the path to get for people like realistically to successfully get there? Is it really just like moving there and just networking? Is that really all? Like, is that
To
really
become
the
an
brunt of it?
artist, more so like a performing artist. Is that what you
Not
mean?
not not even not even an artist. Not even an artist. I'm thinking more so like if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a musician, if you want to be a
Oh,
coach, if you want to
yeah.
work in this supportive kind of industry.
Hmm. I do. I am of the camp that believes you need to go to the city where it's happening, because it is all relational, and you
Mm-hmm.
can be a big fish in a small pond if you want, but you won't ever grow there. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
be able to be a big fish in a big pond, you got to get into the big pond. And so moving to a city like Nashville or even LA, even Atlanta, I mean, it really depends on where you want your genre, kind of the style of music you want to sing and all of that. Um,
Yeah.
it has to be the right timing for people. You know, people have asked me this for years, especially young people that are nervous about making that big step and making that big change in their life of like, I'm sort of scared to move. You know, I moved when I was 21 to New York City, much to my parents'
Mm.
horror. You know, they were like, oh, you wanted to go where? And I was just kind of like, what? That sounds great. And I was an independent
Yeah.
person. I was not afraid of it. And so I went for it. And I'm so glad I did it when I was young. And even though I didn't have the artistry industry success, is exactly what I needed to grow up and to do hard things and to put myself into the shoes of an artist. Because even though I didn't necessarily learn a lot from college that's pertinent to my career, I did in, you know, the streets of New York City. Like I learned a lot there about, and it can communicate a lot of that to people. So I do think that you need to be in
Hmm.
that city and then just start making relationships. Go to open mic nights, meet songwriters, invest in communities where you can leverage your relationships and network with people. And just the thing
Yeah.
is it's Nashville. Every other person is involved in the music industry somehow. You throw a rock and you're going to hit somebody who's a musician. So it does not take
Yeah.
any effort whatsoever to meet people here that are in your field. It really doesn't. And so, man, if somebody's listening, they're like, should I move to Nashville? Yes, you probably should. If you want to do it at the right time in your life, just do it. You know, you don't have to
Yeah.
move here. I would tell this to people when they were thinking about moving to New York too. I was like, just do it. You don't have to come here and live here forever. Give it a year. And if you don't love it, leave. You know, you're not marrying this town. Just try. Just try it. People think of making a big change as this ultimate permanent thing. And that used to be me. I was
Yeah.
very black and white about things too. So I just try to tell people like, look, just try, because you will never really get to those big league levels in a very, very small town. And that is just the nature of the industry. Now, social media has changed this to an extent.
Yeah.
But there is a
Yep.
huge element of proximity when it comes to Nashville. And touring artists will tell you this, specifically touring musicians will tell you that you are typically either a studio musician or a touring musician. Rarely are they
Yeah.
both, because you are out of sight, out of mind when you're on the road with somebody for a long time. And then when you come back, you spend like a month or so just getting back on people's radar for a producer or an artist,
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm here if you need me to come in for session work. And so you get that
Yeah.
proximity thing it applies even to people who live here, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what are your thoughts on, because like it really has never been easier to make good music. It's never
Hmm.
been easier, right? Like
Absolutely.
it used to be like even a decade ago. Actually, I wouldn't say a decade ago, like maybe 15 years ago. It'd be really like you couldn't just sit down on your computer and have access in your own room to make something that sounds like it's the same tier as something that's been mastered by a
Right.
studio, right?
Yeah.
You have all these mini artists that are just being like, you know what, screw the label. I'm just going to throw up my music and see who resonates with it. And maybe they have, you have, what's his name? I think it's Cody. I forget his last name. But these guys like Forrest, who's a big guy in the Christian world right now, is like
Forrest Frank.
Forrest Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like he blew up, and he's just like, I'm just gonna make music, and then he was like, no label. I'm gonna make a couple sync artist things. I'm gonna make a Christian artist thing, and I'm just gonna collaborate with people. And it's not that the skill, like he goes into any room and is like, please sing for me, right? And no one's gonna be like, that guy has a great voice. Or he goes into any studio and he's like, please produce for me. And no one's going to be like, that guy's actually a great producer. But just because he was like, I'm just going to consistently put music out. I'm just going to consistently put myself out there and kind of build a brand from it.
Yeah.
He's built this massive audience and is getting, there's so many artists like that. Like even the TikTok guy, don't turn these beautiful things out. Like that guy, like, I don't know if you heard that song, like the guy that screams. Yeah. So like that guy is just like, I know he got signed, but he's like, he just threw stuff up.
Yeah.
So why, like, what do you think about the future of that industry where artists like can just blow up out of nowhere?
Right.
Is that an exciting thing? Do you think independent artists like have a future? What do you think about that?
I think it's never, to your point, it's music and creating music to share with the world has never been more accessible than it is right now. And it's only going to continue to be that way. So fighting it is useless. I think the people who will get left behind are the perfectionists who are terrified to put anything out there until they think it's like ready or perfect. And it's that done is better than perfect idea. And the people who are like Benson Boone and Forrest Frank, who are having such success with this, they don't care. They just wanted to put stuff out there. And it's not that they're putting out bad stuff. They just didn't wait. They just leveraged the currency of courage and went for it. And it paid off, because even if it wasn't completely perfect, the producers are easier to come by than ever before. So they probably solicited the help of somebody who is a little bit better at producing than them, tinkering around in Pro Tools alone. Or maybe, I don't really know their background story in terms of production, but they learned from somewhere, and likely not from some bigwig producer in New York or LA. And
or from school. They probably didn't go to school for it.
They probably didn't. They just probably learned stuff online and figured it out by experimenting in their spare time. And it's even just the software that we use to record people has become so much more user friendly. And this really has been a long time coming when we moved from analog to digital anyway in production, because it meant that, I don't have to have this enormous soundboard, like mixing board in my basement to produce music. I just need a computer and maybe a MIDI keyboard or something like super basic. And GarageBand, a lot of these things are really game changing software innovations. And so because of that, you can start working on creating beats and just, get on YouTube and you'll find a million tutorials about how to make a beat. And so when you've got these people that are out there just interested and hungry enough to grow in it, then that creativity begets creativity. So the more you flex that creative muscle, the more it strengthens and then produces more creative things. So when you see these people starting and messing with things on a computer, it gets them excited, and then they iterate, and then they create something new, and then it gets better and better, and then they just start putting things out there. And they're, just because of their hunger and their interest, they're leaving everybody else behind who's too scared to play,
What do you there's still an X factor though that comes up. There's an X factor that I'm sure you feel when you hear a voice. Like, what to you, I probably hear that more with like writing. Just because I feel like that's what I've like, I'm trained more in, just because I was never like a really great vocalist. But for you, what is the X factor when you're like, that person, I think they have it, like whatever it is, I think they got it.
It's usually both. It's like the combination. To me, the X factor is this part of the X is the voice and this part of the X is the writing. And it doesn't have to be ready to be pitched to a major label or something like that. It means that there's something really unique there that really needs to be developed and encouraged and drawn out through coaching and development. So for me, it's both. I think when I hear that combination of someone's voice who's like really takes me back, like, whoa, this didn't expect that. Not because their voice is so different from their speech, because I'm a big advocate of speech level singing and making sure that your vocal sound tone production is in continuity and it's in sync with your that your speaking voice is in sync with your singing voice, because that helps create authenticity and like an organic sound. But when there's something there that it's not just their speech like voice, but the phrasing, the turn of a phrase in their songwriting, their dynamics and their vocal tone production, and they say things in a way that I never would have considered. That's the X factor for me is usually both of those things. And I find that because artists that really do dive into songwriting are going into another depth of their own creativity as a performer that non-writing artists don't tap into. It's so like you're just like digging into yourself as a songwriter. You know, you're drawing from your own experiences, and there's so much of you and uniqueness of you that comes from both writing and singing that, like, when you combine those two things, it can really be a superpower. Yeah. And I encourage artists who don't even really love writing to write, because 9 times out of 10, a good singer is not going to become like a profound singer until they start writing. I believe that is just my personal opinion, but I tell people all the time, you will find your own voice more in writing a song than in covering a song. Because if you write something from scratch, even if you think it sucks, if you write something from scratch, the only voice in your head that you have to imitate is your own. Yeah. Versus a cover, you're going to imitate the artist that you've listened to, you know?
Yep. So. I love that, because I mean, I most of the people I love the most they started writing, and they were like that, you know, they were session room writers, and then they became the artist themselves. Like Julia Michaels, I love Julia's.
So many times.
Julia Michaels' voice happens. Is crazy. Yeah, like really Chris Stapleton. Like, there's so many artists that are like, you see them and they're now in their 30s, and it's like, why don't we just have that guy? Like, you just put out that song for yourself. Like, you wrote that, and you should just put it out. I feel like
Natalie Hemby,
I love that. That's my favorite.
That. She's awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know if you as a writer, and then started doing artistry like way late. She got married and started having children, and then she became an artist. Yeah, it's cool how that happens.
If you could buy stock in an artist right now, if you could, like, is there someone that comes to mind where you're like, man, I think they are not even close to where their peak is, or I'm really excited about what they're going to do?
A couple of my artists, actually, that I work with, that I've coached for a long time. There's a few of them that nobody may know. Some of them I know, some of them. Erin Kinsey is one of them. So she's an artist I work with. You
coach Erin Kinsey? Oh my goodness, stop it. I've been obsessed with Should Have Stayed a Summer. Oh yeah. That's been my song for the last like 4 months. That's been my song. Oh my gosh.
She's amazing.
On repeat. I love her. I love her stuff. I was going to say her.
I've coached Erin since she was, I think, 9 years old.
Of course, that's crazy.
Started working with her. Go ahead.
That's so funny. Because I'm not gonna lie to you. Like that, I was gonna give you my answer, and I was gonna say there's an artist I found, is a country artist. I don't usually listen to country music that much, but like,
you're gonna say Erin?
I listened to her stuff, and I was listening to her writing. I was gonna say Erin. I was gonna be like, I found this new artist. She got like an EP and 1 album out, and I was like,
oh my gosh, I love that we had the same person. That's so funny. Don't sleep on Erin, man. She's a phenomenal artist. She's smart, like industry smart. She's an insane writer. This is a funny story. I will tell you this in terms of songwriting. I think this is relevant. When I started working with Erin, her parents are not musicians. They reached out. They were like, hey, we think our daughter is like a good singer, but we don't really know because we're tone deaf. So can you tell us? And I had my first lesson with her. She was literally like 9 years old, home from elementary school on Zoom. And because she lived in Texas and I was in Nashville. And cute as could be, just the sweetest girl, you know, like, hey, I'm here to sing. And I listened to her and I was like, yeah, you're really good for 9. You know what I mean? Like, I was not ready for that. And so I started seeing her every single week for years. We had one session a week every week for years and years. I might have a session with her this week. I'd have to look at my calendar. I saw her last week. I can't remember if I see her this week or not. Like I still
That'd be
work
crazy.
with Erin.
That's crazy.
And she, after working with her for a few months, she was coming in wanting to sing, Taylor Swift covers back when Taylor Swift sang country music and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And finally one day, because I would notice that she would take a melody of a cover song and change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you're a creative little one, aren't you? And so I was like, you know what, Erin, I want you to write a song. I want you to just try. I know you've never done this before, and I'm not even going to give you a whole lot of instruction. I just want you to sit down and try to write a song. She's like, okay. And she comes back the very next week with a completed song called Mean Girls, and kind of like the movie or the musical, right? But not anything to do with it. That was before that time. And it was about mean girls at her middle school or elementary school. I forget what it was, about the girls that were kind of mean in her class. And it was a really good song. And I was floored.
Crazy.
I was like, okay, now you have to write a new song every week. And so she did. And it just spiraled and spiraled. And now, I mean, she's written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs. And her first deal in Nashville was a pub deal, not a record deal. And
that's what I thought. That's what I was wondering that, because I was like, she seemed like the type of all of her writing feels like, okay. Did she sign with Sony on publishing, or was that her artist deal?
You know what? I say it was a pub deal. She was like this with a pub deal, but it wasn't signed for the longest time. I think actually the pub and the record deal came together. Everybody thought she had a pub deal because of how much she was writing for a publisher. But at any rate, so sorry if I misquoted that. But at any rate, she is with Records, which is like an offshoot label of the Sony Records, like the main Sony of Nashville.
Yeah.
Like Records is like a offshoot label of Sony. It's the parent label.
That's so cool.
Anyway, and she's.
Can I tell you something that's really funny?
So good. What'd you say?
Yeah, can I tell you something really funny? Because it is kind of serendipitous, where it's like because I found her. I want to say because I just moved to Florida, and this was like sometime in the fall, and I found her. She posted a clip of it was a social media post because like my algo, believe it or not, my algo is like pretty much all music. So it's like. That it was her, but it was like a recorded thing of her, but it was her playing live, but it was like promoting that song because that song had just come out. And it's so rare for me to be like, I'm actually going to look at that song. But I listened to that song and I was like, I think it was the chorus of it. And I was like, I have to go look her up. And then ever since then, I've been like, that is like, I'm really hoping, because she maxed my short form on that as well. And I was like, she's just so good. I was super, super excited. So I've been following every song since. And I was like, she just put out one. It was like kind of like a bluegrassy one.
She has a new one she's promoting right now that's probably got a little bit more of that musical quality to it. I can't remember what it's called. It's not out yet, but it comes out this month. She's really smart. What Erin does really well is she just studies the industry. Yeah. And she kind of started doing all of those posts, the social media posts on TikTok first. And they really were successful. Yeah. And then she had one of her songs really go viral. And all of a sudden, all these labels noticed. And they're like, oh, who are you? And they started reaching out. She had multiple labels reach out to her. She ultimately ended up signing with Records. And but people who are wondering, as the conversation that we were having, how do I get to where I want to go? Whether you're a writer or you want to be an artist, study people like her who have done this. Yeah. Her label has even told her, like, you clearly know your audience better than we do. You can run with what you want to do. And it's not like they're basically telling her to do whatever she wants, but it's basically like you have your finger on the pulse of your audience and they love what you're doing. And so we want you to kind of call some shots in that. And you got to earn that. Like, that is not just granted to you even when you're signed. There's so much that artists don't realize, that the goal is not to be a signed artist. The goal is to have complete autonomy and awareness of your brand and your audience. And that's why artist development matters. That's why people don't even understand it. Artists don't understand that you're a business and you're a brand. And so you have to know what your brand is, what you want it to look like. Because if you don't know, someone else will tell you. And if you go in as a boss artist and a really good songwriter, but you don't really know your audience, or you don't really know your artistry, but you're a really, really good singer, then people will be interested, but they will tell you, they'll put you into the vending machine of the industry, and out pops, XYZ artist that they want you to sound like. And that happens all the time. And there's a lot of people out there who are ready to take your money and develop you. You got to do some self-development and really know who you are.
Who's the copy that everyone's trying to do? Because there was like every few years there's somebody else. Like everybody was trying to do Billy stuff. Then I feel like a couple years ago everybody was trying to do Olivia Rodrigo, like mixing up Paramore stuff. Like everybody's trying to do that same vibe.
I feel like Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish are still definitely ones that people are taking. They're still big. In pop music, which to me is to almost anything except opera or like classical or musical theater. Sometimes you can exclude country from that, but pop music is just popular, right?
Yeah.
So, but in like commercial pop, not country, I'm starting to see people fall into the trends of some of these LA artists that are popping off, like Natalie Jane and Benson Boone and people like that. Yep. Jake had a big moment for a little while, and people were trying to have that vibe.
He's kind of dropped off, though. He kind of
I don't know what's going on with him.
Super weird to me. I
loved his.
I was watching him because he did some sing stuff, which seemed really cool, and then because he came from the Christian background, so he was producing for like Andy Mineo.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So cool. he was a producer for a long time, and I really loved his stuff. I just feel like he blew up on social media. So I'm not sure what happened in that regard, but I
get
feel like people do want him stuff too,
that are asking me to like analyze this artist, and a lot of them are that LA crew that all sing in each other's cars and in the parking garages. And you see them on TikTok and Instagram, and they all are in each other's videos, and they have I don't even feel like they need to name themselves. They're like a little group. They're not a cult, but there's like their little community.
I know you're talking. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And they're all doing really well on social media. Whether that's translating into dollar bills, I don't know. But some of them are starting to tour, and they're maybe on some smaller labels, or they have some publishing. Or definitely a lot of them have management, but a lot of people are wanting to sound like them. And that's what's interesting, is it's hard to name some of them because you can't necessarily remember their name because you don't always have them on Spotify, but they're always in your algorithm. And they pop up all the time, those songs.
That's actually a good point. That's a good point, though, is like, so I do notice that established artists go to them. So like labels are using them. Labels are paying them for social media pushing of like, who's that one guy? He's a country kind of soul blues artist. I'm trying
the Rich Man from Richmond guy?
He's like no, not that guy.
Poor Man from Richmond.
Oh, this is going to kill me, actually.
Richmond and Richmond. I can't remember.
That's Oliver something. No, it wasn't that guy. Yeah. But I've noticed that people are using those names. The issue with them is that they all do covers. And I've not seen anybody do a good job of actually getting their own original song. Like you have like Addison Rae, who she gets signed by somebody because of that. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to start becoming a pop artist. I think Tate McCree kind of did that same thing where she was like, let me just get in a room with Ryan Tedder. Let's make something happen. Let's figure this out. But like, I've yet to see the social media people break into pop charts because they don't tend to have like an original song that really is like theirs.
Yep, you're right. I feel like they'll have a cool original that's interesting enough to go viral sometimes on social media. But for instance, Natalie Jane got famous because of her cover of I remember when I lost my mind, that cover of the
Oh yeah, I remember her. Yep.
That song, CeeLo song that then somebody revamped, and then she covered it, and she did this really cool run up that was not in the original CeeLo song. I
remember that. Yeah.
And it was a funny video because she reacts to the success of the run. She's like, "Oh, I did it," and then it was hilarious. And then all of a sudden, you've got everybody wants to sing in a parking garage. Everybody wants to cover that run, whether for real or just because it's funny. And they're all covers, right? She also kind of got another bump in popularity when she covered Oceans, that really famous Hillsong worship song. And now everybody and their mom is covering Oceans in a parking garage that are not Christian artists, like super secular stuff. It'll be like F-bombs over here, and then they're going to sing Oceans over here. It's funny. It's actually really cool because I've loved that song for 15 years. It's old. That's an old song. Yeah. And all of a sudden people are like, what is this incredible song? I'm like, it's from like the early 2000s. And so that you're seeing these people, I think they find a cover of a really great song and they put their unique spin on it, whether it's Oceans, I think worked because it was so old. No one was listening to it anymore. So it breathed new life and people are like, oh my gosh, I remember.
It's like you're just
song.
waiting for somebody to do like How He Loves. Like you're just waiting for somebody to pull out like something like really old. Yeah.
And then the other one is like a cover of something that's new, but your voice is really different. One of my favorite covers of all time is John Mayer's cover of Free Fallin'. Have you ever heard that one?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. John Mayer. That's why I taught myself guitar from that song. Yeah.
Oh, I love it so much because it sounds so different from the original. And I listened to that song and I was like, wow, what an incredibly well-written song. I never knew from the original how good of a songwriter he was. And so I think when you can capitalize on the success of an already well-written song and or wherever it is in its wave of popularity, it works.
Tennessee Honey is a great example of that. Tennessee Honey is like the Tennessee Whiskey. By Chris Stapleton.
Yes.
Great example of that. That's like a song from the 80s, 90s. And it was like, it topped at like 77 on Billboard at that time. Mm-hmm. And then now it's like, everybody thinks it's a Chris Stapleton song because it was like, well, it does sound like it was written by him, but it's just a cover. I love that. So Fast Car, actually, that was the new one that kind of came out.
The Tracy Chapman song.
Yeah.
I think that people, it's smart to use that, right? You're standing on the shoulders of somebody else and breaking into a new level. But then eventually you have to create yourself. You have to be an established, fabulous songwriter yourself. So I commend the TikTok singers for putting out their stuff, even if it doesn't really take off, because they're building their fan base. And the more they grow, the better writing rooms they'll get into. And some of them are starting to write, like Benson Boone, and that these beautiful things that I've done. I knew that song before I knew his name. And so somebody was like, what about Benson Boone? I was like, who's that? And then they're like, the guy who sings Beautiful Things or whatever it's called. I was like, oh yeah, I know that song. So that eventually happens when you combine all of the right elements, and it's just a process. They call Nashville the 10-year town because you move here and most people are going to spend 10 years developing and networking and all of that in this city before they really start to see the ROI. And that seems sometimes discouraging to people, but that's people who are thinking that like, I'm the people that are in their early 20s and they cannot fathom being a 30-year-old in the music industry. Those people that think that you can only be successful when you're young. Nashville will blow that mindset out of the water. There's both, but there's room at the table for everybody. You can be 45 and launch your first record.
Help me out with this though, because here's my issue. I do feel like Christian music, worship music, it's always behind. It really is. Like, it's never like the K-Love pop. I'm not even gonna get into that because I feel like that's a whole industry that it just doesn't. Like, I'm glad that they kind of went back into let's record some live, like the quote unquote live, worship albums. Let's redub everything. Let's get these actually properly mixed and stuff. But like, let's do that lane where we have crowd sing aspect. But I still feel like there's really a lack of like good Christian music, good worship music. Maverick City was the best we had for a while. Bethel's still up there. Hillsong's kind of like, and you have all these like tiny churches that are like, we're going to start our own thing. Are you an optimist for Christian music in the next decade, or do you think it's like going to blend with country more, where Chris Tomlin's going to do these, we're going to see more crossover?
Such a good question. I am an optimist about it, but I do think that you're going to continue to see what you just described. A little bit of the imitation of the world that's usually not quite as good. I think there's a couple reasons that contribute to this. I think there's less money in Christian music than in other industries of music. And as a result, less quality goes into production of things. You're not getting Ryan Tedder in a room to write a worship song. You know what I mean? There's amazing writers in the Christian and worship world though, but money is a factor. I think a lot of it is also the audience that K-Love has created, and not just created, but catered to. The audience is people who, I don't want to make a sweeping statement because I have nothing against K-Love.
Give it to me.
I think that a lot of people who are out there listening to Christian radio are not really digging into better options and really, deeper Christian music that they could find through social media, through Spotify and Apple Music, and just learning more what's going on in the industry as a whole. I never listen to the radio, to be completely honest. Every once in a while I turn it on. You don't need to listen to the radio anymore, really, because Spotify will tell you what's on the radio. But K-Love in particular, I would get frustrated because coming from the worship world myself, I was always listening to the live worship stuff, and it carries a different impact and spirit and anointing and weight than a lot of the Christian CCM stuff does. And nothing against CCM artists, but a lot of what gets selected for radio is this watered down, like Pampers version of a really powerful song. And so you've got all the songs. I don't know if you've ever noticed when a worship artist sometimes releases a record that then they want a song as a radio single, they pick the most palatable song on the record that's not usually the most interesting, the best written, but the most palatable that makes K-Love type listeners most comfortable. But really impactful worship stuff can make people uncomfortable, It's deeper, it's powerful. And there's, when you come to the quality of production, there are some really bigger players that are coming on the scene. I love what Mav City has done for the industry and shaking it up as a whole and just challenging people to go deeper in that. So I do think that there's a lot of hope for it because there's a lot of amazing writers and artists in the Christian industry that are like, hey, we can do better. We can create better stuff, and not caring as much if the song that they write is a big radio single hit. Radio has a reach that's why I think people do acquiesce to like a lesser quality song, maybe sometimes going out there because it's more palatable, because they just want to reach people, right? And then maybe they're like bring them into the fold that way, but a lot more people are kind of going, I'm going to write this. This is the single I want to release because this is what I can. I can do that. I can get on social media and start promoting this song. And that's why Forrest Frank has like over 1 million followers, because he did that. And his stuff is palatable. It's definitely K-Love friendly sometimes, but he's also got these other things where he's collaborating with these crazy people. And you were like, who is this guy? What is going on? And he's putting stuff out there.
I see him and I'm like, he's trying.
He's trying.
I think I respect, I don't necessarily love his stuff, but like, I see it and I'm like, man, I'm glad that someone else is like going against the grain because I mean, to be honest, like I'm trying to think of like, I'll make the sweeping statement. Like other than Phil Wickham, I just feel like there's really not much quality in terms of the writing. Like, and even then you have all these things where like Elevation's doing the stuff with Stephen Furtick and it's like, okay, Stephen Furtick has a ton of writing credits. I'm not really sure what that's about. Maverick City, even they kind of broke up
in his background.
And I know, but even then it's like Maverick City broke up. They got rid of anybody that wanted a piece of the action. And then Brandon, Chandler, and Naomi were like, I'm going to keep all the money. And like that, there's a tough aspect to that industry that I just dislike a lot.
It's a business.
Because I feel like there's,
And that's even another factor in this conversation too, is I think a lot of Christian artists, worship leaders come into it with ministry as their mindset, not business. And that's a very like awkward rub there for many people who really struggle with like, how do I be an artist, but also have to deal with this business aspect when I was like doing this just for God. And I don't know how to do both. And so there's a big learning curve. And there's so much judgment from the Christian community to artists in the Christian music industry of like, how dare you make money? I mean, people are so offended by somebody having the audacity to make money doing what they do. That creates a lot of controversy. It's hard to have both of those things. That's not an issue in the secular music industry whatsoever. It's like, of course this is a business. Of course we're here to make money. More money, the better. The more money makes the world go round and creates better quality music. And so that is not translated as much in the Christian world.
Meanwhile, we have like Bono, who's like, he says he's a Christian, and we're like, yes, we got one.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, there he is. We, you know, like we have Carrie Underwood. Cool. Sweet. She's at the top. Christian, my team, but it's like anybody that's coming up within the Christian realm, that's where it gets tough. You know, you wonder like the amount of people that were hopping on the Justin Bieber bandwagon when he was hanging out with the Hillsong. Like people like really want to support it. But if he came up in the Christian space, you would not be like the fact that Jake somehow came up and escaped the Christian space almost and came up in pop. I was like, man, that's actually really,
he was an artist. You know, he wasn't
it was
on the
really
radar.
impressive.
Because if he was just doing production, he wasn't really an artist in the Christian space. He didn't pop up on people's radar until he was an artist. And that's where people are like, oh, wow, look, there's a Christian in the secular music industry. That's amazing. But you're absolutely right. You don't see that come up on the other side, which is a double standard. It's a huge double standard. So I do have hope because I think that there's incredible people in the industry, but there's going to still be some challenges that we'll see. I think it's interesting to kind of watch that play out. You know, I've got artists that I've worked with that deeply desire to impact the CCM world. And then others who are like, I don't want anything to do with CCM. I want to go and worship. But both of them are still having a hard time navigating the business aspect of it because that's real. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to wrap this up because I want to be sensitive to your time. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day long because it's super. Oh yeah, I can talk about it. I can talk about it all day. I love it. So I want to kind of do a CTA towards you here because I think like people are hearing your expertise, people are hearing your tone. Also, like I'm not sure there's probably not many artists that are listening to this because we're talking a lot about like the business aspect of stuff. But I do think that. I think I saw that you have multiple levels of training for people and you have a ton of resources for people that are just like, I just want to get started. Because there's every person, you ask any person on the planet, every person is like, I wish I had a good voice. Even good people that have good voices, they're like, I wish I could sing. That's if you like anybody that's watching this would be like, oh my goodness, if you could tell me I could watch a few videos and learn enough to maybe not fix my tone deafness, but at least like, what is a harmony? Like the amount of times my wife is like, Grant, can you teach me how to like sing a harmony? That's something that so many people want. So how can people interact with you and be able to learn some of these things from a getting started perspective, especially where it's like, maybe they're not qualified to work with you on a one-on-one level, but just kind of access the resources you have. Yeah. I've got several things outside of the one-on-one, which I'm pretty limited in my time for that one. But I have one of my favorite things that I get to do right now is working with my group masterclass. So I have a group called the Training Club where I go live every week and I'm teaching vocal workouts. Everybody's on Zoom, everybody's on mute but me, and I am teaching a very specific a specific curriculum to these singers that I don't teach actually anywhere else. And the concept is modeled after this idea of train the voice the way you train the body. So I'm incorporating modalities of physical fitness into vocal workouts. That does not mean you're doing physical workouts while you're singing. It just means that if there's a cardio day, that means we're working on vocal stamina and endurance. And in every workout, we work the voice top to bottom, the whole thing. Because the goal is for me to create vocal athletes, people out there who can handle whatever rigor they want. And it gives them the tools and the techniques that they can begin to use to create their artistry. One of my founders' quotes is that technique is the gateway into authentic artistry. I'll say that again. Technique is the gateway into authentic artistry because, and I alluded to this before, I believe that if somebody is held back in any way by their technique, then they're not really being able to express the fullest version of what's inside of them. But if they could, then now they're not singing from a place of lack or detour around something they can't quite execute, but they're able to pick whatever is in their heart in that moment to sing, not just sing what they can get away with. That's my goal out of that group. It's an amazing community. Everybody in there is so cool. We have this great side WhatsApp chat going on all the time. And I actually get to go one-on-one with people in that group on our practice room days. And it's a private one-on-one setting where I get to see everybody for a few minutes. And that's my group training. It's called the Training Club. That's my group masterclass. I've got another small group for vocal coaches where I'm developing and mentoring vocal coaches as well. And then I've got some different courses that you can do at your own pace online that you can. In fact, if you're in my training club, you get access to all of my courses included while you're involved.
Nice.
But,
yeah.
And then I've got a new platform I'm excited to launch where I'm going to be doing live coaching. And that one's going to be like kind of my entry level in terms of price point of when someone can't afford any of those coaching options, of being able to actually watch live streaming vocal coaching going on. So that one's coming soon.
I love it. And just so everybody knows, I think I love watching your content. It's just fun. Like,
thanks.
You would think that this is like, it's like, how do you do this? How do you make it engaging? Like, you don't, if you're also like, I just want to get to know Shelby and get to know how she teaches, go through her Instagram profile, because there's like, all this stuff is like, it's entertaining. It's really fun. It's really like knowledge filled. It's like so much information is compacted into each one of those. And so that's even just a great entryway for people to like get to know you and get to know, like, everybody wants to learn how to sing. And we're talking about all these people. Like, I know I'm fanning out. Like, I mean, when you say Johnny Swim, Colby Clay, like Aaron, I'm like, okay, you got me hooked. But people like just interact with her content and learn for yourself, because I think like it doesn't take much. Like, it's a muscle. Like, writing is a muscle, creativity is a muscle, singing is a muscle. Yes, some people do have genetic advantages, and some people are just like dopamine wise, they're going to get more excited about doing it. But I think everybody probably has, like, I can't wait. I'm going to share this episode with my sister Missy, and she's amazing. She's like the best singer I know, and like done albums and stuff. She's awesome. But I was like, she'll see your content and she's going to fan out, because she's like, I can just tell she's like, you would vibe with her well. So that's cool. Yeah, I'm excited for people to see this and interact.
Hard work will always outperform raw talent if that raw talent chooses not to work hard. 10 times out of 10. If somebody's like, maybe doesn't have the really raw skill set, and I've seen this. People are like, yeah, right. I'm like, no. I've literally seen somebody who was, in their opinion, tone deaf, which I don't think anybody's actually tone deaf, but they would have called themselves tone deaf, terrible singer, whose before and after would blow your mind. There's no way that's the same person. I literally witnessed it. Like, I've seen it happen, and people can learn, because anybody can learn any skill set, because I say the voice is a physical muscle. The voice is a muscle, and it is first and foremost a muscle. It is also an aesthetic, but if you approach the voice as if it is a muscle, then it will become aesthetically pleasing. And if you don't, it probably won't. People probably won't like it, but you got to work that thing. It's like everybody's got a body, but not everybody's in shape. You know what I mean? Yeah. But anybody can choose to get in shape.
I saw a video. It was Ed Sheeran on the Graham Norton show, and they found a video of him as a teenager singing and writing, and it sounded like a dead cat. It sounded really bad. Yeah. And you see him now, and he's like, put aside his voice, he has an incredible voice, but he's largely considered the best pop writer of the last decade, just because. And like, to your point, like, that's just hard work. That's not like you woke up and was like, I'm an attractive person who can sing super well. Like we think that all these artists are like that, and that's just not the case. Like a lot of the people, like, they just were like, I'm just going to work on my gift.
I love listening to him talk about that, because he's such a good voice in this space to help people understand, like, no, you have to work hard. Listen to me. I was bad, and I've listened to his before and afters. It's crazy. And he's just like, no, I just worked hard. This is nothing magical. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so where can people find you? How can people connect with you? What do they have to look up?
You go to my Instagram at Shelby Rollins MV, which stands for Master Vocal, which that's my brand. So Shelby Rollins MV. Awesome. That's the same on TikTok, but Instagram is my primary platform. On YouTube, it's Master Vocal Studios, and then my website is mastervocal.com.
Awesome. Well, Shelby, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. I can't wait for people to hear this and people to connect with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
On to the next one. See everybody.
Can't slow us down.